Hare Krishna. My name is Dharmatma Das. I am serving in ISKCON Vrindavan since 2006. And the ISKCON management in Vrindavan temple, they have asked me to interview some of Srila Prabhupada disciples who were closely associated with Srila Prabhupada in 1977 when Srila Prabhupada was performing his final pastimes in his home here. And today we have His Holiness in Dhanurdhar Maharaj, and the executive committee of the GBC wants your views concerning the poison issue to help the devotees understanding the facts. So please keep it simple and clear. I will ask you a few questions. The first question is, were you in Vrindavan in October and November 1977 when Srila Prabhupada was here?
Yes,
You were here.
I was here.
Okay. What made you come to Vrindavan at that time?
I was teaching in Dallas Gurukul, and Prabhupada asked to move the school here and requested us to come.
Okay. The next question is, were you aware that Srila Prabhupada came to Vrindavan at that time to conclude his pastime on this planet?
I was here when he came back from
Rishikesh.
Rishikesh. Woke up in the morning and we were living in the guest house. We're informed that he was coming. Devotees were very busy. They had that devotion, preparing everything. And then I was in the room when Prabhupada called the devotees in. There weren't that many people here at the time. I don't think devotees today can imagine how few people were in Vrindavan, because it didn't seem there was more than 20 people in the room, as I recall. And Prabhupada said that he said that if one has to leave the world, then let him come to Vrindavan. Everything is here. I remember he mentioned the white sands of Raman Reti, which was just previously right near our temple. He said the Jamuna. And then I remember he said something like, but if one has to leave this world, then he said something like, but what is death but a change of body? And then he quoted Bhagavad Gita, I think, 213 or 214, Dehenosmin yata dehe, komaranyovanam jara, tata dehantara praptiya. As the embodied soul passes from boyhood to childhood, youth to old age, similarly at the time of death, the self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a thing. So he said like that. And then he began to talk about Jayananda, who had passed away. And I remember him saying he loved me so much. And mentioned he gave the donation for my nectar of devotion. And I don't think I was a close associate with Prabhupada. I was here serving. We were so busy. I don't know how we associated with personally, but I was in the room and I was very impressed at how a devotee made his way into Prabhupada's heart by his service. I can go on. When I first came to the temple, Jayananda was there in San Francisco in 1970 when I was visiting in Frederick Street. So that was impressive. I was also here when Srila Prabhupada came from Mumbai. I was also here when he left. I don't know how much detail to go into, but I was here when he went to the West. I was here when he came back, right outside his door. He came by the train. People picked him up in some kind of vehicle. Brahmananda was carrying him in. It looked like the Pieta, of Christ, in the arms. And Prabhupada turned and folded his hands, looked at us, again, just a few people, and said, quoted King Kulashekar, Krishna Tvadiya Parapankajapa. Let me die now when the swan of my mind is entangled in the lotus of your feet. Otherwise, at the time of death, how will remember you? So at least I was in the area and there.
Thank you, Maharaj. And the last question is, there is some speculation that is going on that Srila Prabhupada was poisoned by his disciples. So what is your feeling about that?
It seems incredulous. I haven't studied the issue, but at least in terms of here, and seeing the devotees that were serving him, I wouldn't have that indication. I was in the room when Prabhupada passed away. It was, the moment was confirmed in everybody's heart. I remember Bhakti True Swami behind Prabhupada with his hands folded. It just, I don't, it's hard to remember every detail. I remember one devotee, Nilamani, from Venezuela, after Prabhupada passed, he just collapsed on the floor. But I remember after Prabhupada passed, so Bhakti True Swami with his hands folded, it just made an impression on me. He looked angelic. He looked like the moment really affected him deeply. And at the same time, he was realizing Prabhupada's glory, Nitya Lila Pravishta. And with my limited context also, when Prabhupada left, I believe Bhadaraj was on the bed doing the kirtan. It wasn't call and response. Everybody was calling from their hearts. You see things through the frame of reference of your own experience. So when that happened, my own impression was, it was almost like there was some classical symphony of kind of glory, of the triumph. The separation was deep, but the triumph of Prabhupada entering into Nitya Lila. And, almost like dan, dan, dan. And I really envisioned that there was no roof, ceiling. It was just sky above Prabhupada. So that was one impression I had. And Bhavananda was there. I used to go in the morning because, our service started basically at 5:30, 4:30 in the morning. It went all day. Bibi Govinda Swami told me that actually Prabhupada was so merciful that he opened up his room 24 hours a day. In other words, initially you had to go past his secretary, right? But at a particular time, he just opened the doors. You can go in any time. He was so merciful. The only time I could go in was like at 2:30 in the morning. So I remember there being alone, and Bhavananda was there. Only I was there sitting and chanting my japa, and then I heard Prabhupada was screaming. He was in pain. Hare Krishna, something like that. And Bhavananda, asked me to help adjust Prabhupada's bed. I mean, from my perspective, it looked like there was someone who really cared for Prabhupada and was concerned about him. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I know he was the secretary, and when we'd come in to do kirtan for Prabhupada, before it was open, you had to go by him. And I remember coming in and him saying, the Prabhupada said the kirtan should be very, very melodic. Not Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, very melodic. So Prabhupada's condition was very, very sensitive. So I saw that care. It seemed like someone was caring. That was my perspective. I know a door slammed in the guest house. It was disturbing Prabhupada. His servants would come up and tell people to be quiet. So, that was basically my impression. And then the pastimes, I remember being there when there was a special medicine that was needed by Srila Prabhupada. Something of Ramanuja Kaviraj. I'm trying to envision what happened, but I was in the room at the time, and someone came in and said, we found, it was kind of like a mystical thing that they found. Someone knew a friend who was making that medicine, and it was the Ramanuja Kaviraj, etc. What?
Banamali Kaviraj?
I don't know what it is, but my impression at the time is that they were searching for this medicine, and someone ran into someone who had a friend who was making this medicine. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was sitting at Prabhupada's feet, and he said to Prabhupada, that Prabhupada, this is like being in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it gave me the impression that he was glorifying Prabhupada, that this was Gaur Leela. I was also in the room, I'm trying to just be objective and just see. This is what I saw from my perspective. I was overwhelmed in my own service, but fortunate enough to sometimes get a glimpse of Prabhupada and his servants, and that was my perspective at the time. I remember, I believe I was in the room also where Prabhupada said, take me to Govardhan. And I believe I remember that it was Lokanath Swami and Trivikram Swami that immediately ran out to get a bullock cart. And then I believe I was privy at that time to the kind of discussion. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Bhakti True Maharaj said, we're not going to let you go. This will kill you, Prabhupada. That affected me too, because that looked like spontaneous devotion. It was above, it was right from the heart, because it was above like reverential. Prabhupada said we have to follow the order of the Guru. It was love that superseded this. No, Prabhupada, we're not going to let you go. So from my humble and limited perspective of a devotee here who is young and, overwhelmed with Vrindavan, overwhelmed with his own service, my perspective was that these were people who had loved and cared for Prabhupada. That was my only vision of it. It would seem incredulous to me, and there was no indication of it to me that they would do something like that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.